It's another day and here I am. I'm in my car because for the last however many weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is, I've been at home, not able to work. I've looked for other jobs and looked for other work to do, and that's difficult because the wilderness dog seems to be looking for work as well at the moment. So the jobs are a little bit hard to come by. And on the news today, it's talking about the unemployment, 600,000 more people unemployed, and sounding surprised by it. That always gets me. You know, the other day it was the economy in April was down by 20%. Well, why are you surprised? As soon as we started this lockdown, it was obvious it was going to have massive impacts. So I can't work because I can't socially distance in the car. And to give you an example, that is where we would be. So if you're driving, your face will be where my phone is now. And this is how close we would be for at least an hour. And I say at least an hour because one of the recommendations when we do get back into driving or teaching is that because of the amount of time we've got to spend cleaning our cars, that we try and encourage people to have 2-hour driving lessons. That's one of the recommendations. And the reason for doing that is because it will then cut down the amount of time between each lesson that we're having to deep clean the car, basically. And I've got all the things in place. I've got, the wipes, the alcohol cleaner, everything's in here. It's all ready to go. I'm ready to start work as soon as we can. But we can't socially distance, so we are a risk. And one of the comments that was made by somebody who's a driving instructor who was talking about this, and he's quite one of the bodies that we work for. It's one of those, and he made the comment that I'm not going to go back to work until 2 weeks after I'm allowed to hug my grandchildren, which is a fair point, because we would have possibly 4, 5, 6, 7 people in this car on a daily basis. So if we can have 5, 6, 7 strangers and take their word for the fact that they haven't been in contact with anything and we couldn't spread it around, then why can't we meet our family? So when we can meet our family, then we'll meet the general public. Okay, which is the point he was making, and it's a fair point. One of the things that came up on this webinar that I've been listening to was the fact that the police are stopping cars with L plates on. Now I know that there are driving instructors who are going back to work. The advice is that we only teach critical workers who have a critical driving test booked in the system. So in other words, just because somebody's a nurse or needs a car for the job doesn't mean that they can automatically have driving lessons. They have to be a critical worker with a critical driving test booked. The driving tests are all cancelled. Only critical workers can apply for one and have one. Such is the state of play, and there's no time frame of when driving tests are going to get back in. They were talking today about having 4 months worth of driving tests. In fact, it's going to be longer than that. It's going to be about 6 months worth of driving tests to fit back in to the system before they can then open up the diary to the likes of you and I again. So we're going to be in a it's going to be long term. In fact, it's going to be long term. So the issues that revolve around driving instructors going back to work before we get any information to do so. First of all, the spread of infection. We can see how close we're working together. There is a real risk, and even with all the precautions that we take, most of us take them and do them religiously. Not everybody does. But there's also an insurance issue, because insurance companies, they don't work the same way that we do. I know from experience, they will not pay out if they can get out of paying out. And a lot of insurance companies are refusing to insure people unless they're teaching critical workers for a critical driving test. I've had to train to get a badge to be able to train critical workers, and I've used it once so far. So just because I've got the badge doesn't mean that I've got the right to go and train everybody else. And insurance companies are aware of that and have taken the insurance away, other than critical workers. But another thing that came up, the police are pulling up people without plates on, and if they can't prove that they're teaching a critical worker, the occupants of that car are getting fined. So one of the ironies is that as a professional driving instructor, I can't go out and teach people, but they can go out driving with somebody in their household, because that's not seen as a risk, except it's seen as a non-essential journey, and that's where the fine comes in. So there are people up and down the country being fined. There are also driving instructors being abused and physically and verbally for doing driving lessons at these times. I've heard of that as well. But even driving instructors are being pulled up by the police, and if they can't prove that they're doing a critical driving lesson, if you like, they're getting fined. But the implications for that are that if the insurance isn't covering that kind of stuff, the pupil can then be prosecuted for driving without insurance, and also be prosecuted for making a non-essential journey, totally oblivious and trusting the driving instructor that the driving instructor knew what he was doing and was being professional, when actually they're not. And I've even heard one case where the pupil wasn't allowed back in the car by the police, so the pupil had to she had to find her own way home, while the driving instructor was allowed to drive away back home with his tail between his legs. It's not good publicity for any business. So that's the frustration of some of the businesses that are going on, and I know hairdressing and other businesses have been mentioned, but you can see just how close we're going to be when we get back to training, and even with masks and PPE and all that kind of thing, there's going to be so many limitations to the way we're going to be able to do our job. But we live in hope. We keep working. I keep my ear to the ground, and when we can start doing things, we'll start doing things again, but we'll do it properly.